Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Time and Again Theatre Company. Following is a very important broadcast.
Hello and welcome to our first ever live stream. I'm Laura and I'm the writer and producer of Time and Again Theatre Company. We specialise in bringing moments of history to life and are really excited to be celebrating the 75th anniversary of VE Day today by launching a new podcast and also continuing our audio drama of Greyhounds as part of the Library Presents In Your House programme. Now, this evening, I'm joined by some of the cast who will be talking a bit more about their characters and how recording a show set during World War II has helped to bring this special anniversary to life for us, as well as sharing some videos of the whole company getting ready for VE Day and even performing an exclusive new scene from the audio drama. So let's introduce you to the members of the cast who will be joining me this evening. Who wants to go first?
Well, I suppose I'll go first then.
Okay, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Cooper. I play Edward Holmes in the audio drama. I also help out behind the scenes. I help Laura with lots of the editing work on the audio drama. Edward is a member of Bomber Command. He is, at least in part one. So he has... there are obviously a lot of... there's a lot of stories really going on there, and from that he eventually stops flying on sources in the air and ends up doing some groundwork.
Cool, thank you. Catherine?
Hello, I'm Catherine and I play Ruby in Greyhounds. Ruby is the hapless director of Shuttlefield, where the play is set, their production of Henry V. She's got quite a job on her hands because, guys, she hasn't got the greatest cast, no offence. But it all unravels and she finds herself on VE Day a lot more vulnerable than she was at the start of the play.
Great. And Fiona?
Hi, I'm Fiona Primrose. I play Nancy Wilde in Greyhounds. Nancy is an aspiring actress, so I think she would take some mild offence to Catherine's comment just there about not having the best cast for Henry V.
Apart from you, dear. Apart from you.
Apart from Nancy, yeah. So she was a chorus girl in London. And essentially she's like an evacuee, so she moves to Shuttlefield to move in with her aunt and help her in the grocers. And she kind of goes on a real journey actually over the two parts of the play. She ends up being quite a different person, I think, when we see her in the second parts with VE Day, because she's kind of been able to sort of like reinvent herself in some ways throughout the war. So yeah, she's a lovely character and really fun to play.
As well as writing the show, I also play Catherine Winters, who is Ruby's younger sister, and Catherine is extremely logical. She's literal to a fault, and she's also a bit of a genius when it comes to spotting patterns and solving mathematical problems. So she's kind of a bit of a foil for Ruby, who's like a true artist, whereas Catherine kind of cuts through everything with lots of blunt, very honest comments that can be a bit uncomfortable for everybody.
It's an interesting sisterly relationship.
So VE Day is a big moment for the residents of Shuttlefield, and when we meet our characters again on the morning of 8th of May 1945, it's been 4 whole years since we last saw them. Now, when we normally perform Greyhounds on the stage, it's split into 2 acts. The first hour takes place in 1941, and then we have the interval, and while the audience has a cheeky drink or two, we get ready to re-emerge into 1945. And that's where tonight's brand new episode of our audio drama will be picking up, 7 a.m. on VE Day morning. But what's been happening in Shuttlefield up to then? What were they getting up to when we last saw them in 1941?
Well, as I mentioned, the lovely Ruby has been steering the ship of the good Henry V. So this rowdy rabble have been her actors, and yeah, they've been getting up to lots of mischief in rehearsals.
Wasn't entirely smooth sailing of that ship, was it?
No. There were multiple instances with wooden swords, knitted chainmail, trumpets.
Mrs. Holt's longbow.
Mrs. Holt's longbow.
Yes, preferable to keep her away from the weaponry.
Essentially, the villagers of Shuttlefield decided to stage a production of Henry V to raise money for their local Spitfire Fund, despite the fact that Ruby had never read a Shakespeare play before in her life. And yeah, that's where all our characters meet, and that's where our story starts. So if you want to catch up on that, all of the episodes are going to be available on our SoundCloud from tomorrow, so you can see what's been going on up to 1945. But now I think it would be a good time to see our characters getting ready for their VE Day street party. The cast have filmed a little video of what they think might have been happening in Shuttlefield on VE Day morning, so we're going to watch that now.
Right, Mrs. White is counting on me getting these knives for the party. I found these. Can you just take them in there and put them down? See if there's any more in the other room for me.
Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. If we're going to make a success of this street party, we're going to need to run it with military precision. Right, that's the cutlery. What's next on the agenda?
I best get going. I've got a train to London to catch. We're going to wave at the King. Oh, could you take these plates to Bedford Road? I think that's everything.
Well, what am I supposed to do with these? I don't understand why we're spending so much time taking all the plates and knives and things outside onto the street, when really it would be much easier just to eat in our homes. I suppose I better give them to Ruby. She always knows what to do with these things. She's getting terribly excited today.
And that is the last of the sandwiches for the street party. Oh, I do hope there'll be enough. Last rations. What was that? Oh, yes, of course, here you are, my dear.
Thank you, Ruby. Very kind of you to make sandwiches. Have you got any cucumber ones like I asked for? Oh, yes, very nice indeed. Right, cutlery, sandwiches. What was next? Plates?
Yeah, I've got those plates for you. Yeah. My mum wanted to know as well, are you making an upside down cake? Because if you are, that's fine. It's just she didn't want to make the same thing as you. She can make a crumble. Oh, good. Good. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Anyway, here are your plates.
Thank you, Bertha. These all of the plates you could rustle up? I think you've done a smashing job with that. Lovely.
Ruby asked me to bring you these. She said they're for Operation Street Party, and she doesn't want Mrs. Henderson to use them because she'll break them. Here you go.
Oh, marvellous! Some more plates and cups for the garden party. I'm so excited. We've been waiting for this for years. Oh, I've got some more here. I'm sure they'll do. Marvellous. Oh, it's so exciting. I hope you've got enough chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Holt. This is just what we need for a lovely cup of tea. And you know, I've been saving a little bit of sugar for just such an occasion.
Blinking nonsense. Party at this time of day? Good. Right, well, and they want the gramophone. Better make sure it works still. Hang on a minute. I tell you what, they better be careful with it. If this gets damaged, there'll be trouble. Right, come on then. Let's see if you can work. What, and you want plates as well? Here, have them then.
Very much been a focal point of the celebrations for VE Day, but not necessarily would everyone have been excited to be taking part. Catherine, your character Ruby is very much the glue that holds Greyhounds together. When we first meet her, she's trying to lead a performance of Henry V to raise money for the Spitfire Fund, as we said. And by the end of the war, she's trying to adapt to a new way of life after being blinded in an air raid. How do you think Ruby views VE Day?
I think really, the war has brought Ruby a lot, but it's also taken a lot away from her. So whereas she was quite an outsider at the start of the play, throughout the first half in 1941, she's made a whole host of new friends who were more like-minded than her, than the villagers, who love a bit of tittle-tattle, talking behind people's backs. So I think probably there would be a bit of trepidation from her, especially now she's more vulnerable, being blind. I mean, is that all going to melt away? Is she going to be left behind as people's lives move on? But I also think it's taught her that life is short, and she should pursue her dreams rather than just talking about them or encouraging others to pursue theirs. So for her, it's an opportunity for freedom. I think ultimately she's celebrating new beginnings and shrugging off the pains of the past. Like, a lot of painful memories are tied to the war, so she's probably looking forward to being able to distance herself from those. I think the practicalities of VE Day itself, being blind, people don't think she can do much for herself, and that she might not be able to contribute to the celebrations as much as she would like. Whereas I think she probably is perfectly capable, and she's probably a bit frustrated at how things are panning out. And all the busybodies organising around her.
Yeah, I think Ruby's always felt very stifled by the small village environment, hasn't she? And I think after the bomb, I think it kind of heightens it even more, because then people start treating her like, not necessarily like an idiot, but like they treat her as though she, like you said, like she's not capable, when she clearly is very capable.
Yeah, I think she's looking ahead when we get to VE Day, looking forward to what could come next outside of the village.
Yeah. So Fiona, let's talk about Nancy. Mm-hmm. She's also initially an outsider, quite literally an outsider. She comes to Shuttlefield as a way of escaping all the terrible bombing in London, but soon makes friends and becomes part of village life, as well as ruffling a few feathers. How do you think she changes over the course of the war?
So, like you say, she initially moves to Shuttlefield from London to escape the bombing, but we kind of learn, I don't want to give too much away about what we learn about her in part one, but you learn that there are other reasons as well why actually it's kind of, not that a war is ever a convenient thing, obviously it's horrible, but it kind of gives her an opportunity to escape other parts of her life as well. So I think this kind of idea of Nancy being an outsider when she first moves, it's kind of double-edged in a way. It's kind of bad for her because she's very aware that, like, the neck curtains are twitching and people are talking about her behind her back. They see her as quite brash, I think. There's kind of a comment about her wearing red nail polish in the shop and things like that. But also the fact
my mother never lived to see the day.
Yes, exactly. But then the fact that no one knows her is also, apart from her aunt, is a real opportunity for Nancy as well. Like, she gets to reinvent herself. I think kind of in her previous life, she kind of didn't feel much purpose perhaps, and we kind of get a hint of that when she talks about her past relationships, whereas particularly, like being in the play, that gives her a real sense of purpose, getting involved in village life, helping her auntie in the shop, and particularly her relationship with Ruby, I think is really key for that in part two as well. So it was actually quite interesting hearing you talk about the fact that Ruby gets quite frustrated when people are helping her out so much, because actually Nancy is probably right at the forefront of that. She sort of becomes Ruby's carer, and I think it's kind of mutually beneficial. I think it makes Nancy feel really good to be able to help her friend in that way, and perhaps for once in Nancy's life she's doing it because she genuinely really cares, and she gets a lot out of that relationship too. But I think she'd be absolutely mortified if she knew that Ruby kind of didn't actually need that help either. But that's very much kind of Nancy's.
It's quite nice for Ruby as well, though, because Catherine has moved away to go and do some vital war work, and she's got Nancy to kind of fill that sister space.
Yeah, it is kind of a sisterly
job at it than Catherine did.
Yeah, Catherine is not not a very reciprocal of Ruby's love, is she?
Not quite.
I think also a very big factor in 1940s life was the deep-rooted class system, and I think coming to Shuttlefield opens up Nancy's horizons a bit, because she's from a very working class background, like from London, like we've said, and I think she gets to mix with people that she wouldn't necessarily have had a chance of meeting before the war.
Yes, I think that gets some eyebrows twitching and some kind of comments as well, particularly her relationship with Edward. And even her aunt kind of picks up on that a little bit, the fact that normally Edward and Nancy, those are two worlds that kind of wouldn't have collided usually. And it is kind of getting people talking, the fact that they're spending so much time together. I shall say no more. But yeah, it is kind of interesting how the war kind of throws a lot of the rules out the window in some way, because you are getting these communities that are having to come together, and particularly through the play as well, you know, that perhaps wouldn't do normally. So you kind of get to explore those relationships, which is really fun.
Yeah, I think the war definitely went about bringing down quite a bit of the entrenched class system. I mean, obviously there's still lingering effects of that very much still in force now.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But it definitely broke down some of the barriers that were, because I mean, if you think it was only like 20, 30 years before the war that it was Edwardian society and that level of class etiquette.
Yes.
I think Nancy is definitely the most optimistic on VE Day, and is perhaps the only one of our main characters who's genuinely happy. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think she kind of buys into, I think, all the propaganda and things anyway, particularly in part one, and her Shakespeare speech that she does from Henry V, I think kind of reflects that. Like, she really gets behind this rallying cry and everything. So I think she would absolutely love the day, kind of get really into all the bunting and the baking and maybe having a bit of dry sherry as well. But I think, you know, in today, she would definitely, every anniversary, she would be getting the bunting out and celebrating. So I think, you know, she is a very positive, optimistic person, but I think the kind of war and the transformation she went through personally is so significant to her. And I think she does see this as like the chapter, like the new chapter of her new life now.
Yeah. As you mentioned, one of the characters that Nancy builds a connection with is Edward. Edward is particularly preoccupied on VE Day, particularly not in the mood for celebrating. Why do you think it's a difficult day for him?
Well, for Edward, he's compared to the other residents of Shuttlefield, he's kind of he grew up in the village, but he has left for a number of years, and is only really in the first part of the audio play anyway. He's actually only really a temporary resident there, while he's doing some new work in recruitment. So when obviously VE Day rolls around, obviously wonderful success. But as Edward is quite deeply entrenched with his work, you know, the job's only half done as far as he's concerned. While it is a brief reprieve, obviously, from his usual work, you know, the war's still ongoing for him. So as much as he wants to probably go to a street party and really get involved, he kind of has to still stay that separate world from it, thinking, well, you know, still need to do all of this. And you know, like Fiona was saying, Edward and Nancy wouldn't normally have crossed paths at all, from very, very different backgrounds. But the war was really about necessity, really. Those old preconceived notions couldn't really stand. If anything, they would just hinder things. So Edward is back in the village in 1945. Not just he's not really even there. He wouldn't normally be there. He's actually on the lookout for somebody who's gone AWOL, which may or may not be Catherine. So really, he is just, in the intervening years between parts 1 and 2, Edward's really just not really wanted to go back or had any reason to go back. And thanks to Catherine, he's been pulled back into this.
It's been quite a difficult war, to use that term, for Edward. His brother was killed very early on in the war, and he also served as part of Bomber Command, and I think carrying the weight of that is something that very much affects him for the time that we know Edward in the play / audio drama.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with that. Bomber Command was, well, a unit that had the highest attrition rate of any British unit. It was about, they had a death rate of about 44%, which was, I think it was actually slightly worse than an infantry on the Western Front in 1914.
Yeah.
So to really sort of put a number to that statistic, I mean, if you take about 100 members of Bomber Command, 55 of those will be killed, just outright. That's not including airmen who were shot down and captured, airmen who were shot down and weren't able to fly again. It's really, you know, you're looking about 27 of that 100 coming back without any particular injuries or captured or anything like that. And obviously, because there was a very much a social, maybe not, well, a social stigma toward strategic bombing. Seen as British, you know, it wasn't seen as gentlemanly or fair or even that particularly civilized. So Bomber Command, even though, you know, they lost roughly about 55,000 people, and they weren't even mentioned in Churchill's Victory Day speech. So obviously they got parts of that weighing on Edward's mind, that huge amounts of turnover, you know, week in, week out, there'd be people just joining, never coming back. And it's that level of stress which Edward does have to cope with during the first part of it, which does go into a bit more detail with his mental state and how he eventually ends up in the recruitment. And, you know, even in modern history, really, it was only 2012 when Bomber Command finally got a memorial.
Yeah.
And even since that went up, it was vandalised 4 times in 6 years. And, you know, this is, you know, it was about 60 years on from the time, yet there's still that level of, well, shades of grey about it.
It's a really beautiful memorial, actually. It's in London, and it's a statue of a Lancaster bomber crew, and then it also has some quotes from Churchill and other people, and I just think it's really important that it's really important for Bomber Command to get that recognition, because they were just young men that were doing the job that they were told they had to do.
Yeah.
And obviously they didn't attain any of the glamour or the label of heroes that the fighter pilots of the Spitfire and Hurricane pilot got through the war. But obviously I think it's really important that they're remembered, and I think it's quite shameful that it took until 2012 for them to sort of be given their memorial and given their respect.
Yeah, that's why I think, you know, VE Day is a wonderful cause to sort of like celebrate, but it is also really important that it should kind of be a sober event as well, I think, and just kind of like real sober remembrance of the huge loss and sacrifice and the horrors of war. Like, it's, you know, it's just awful. The kind of statistics you were saying earlier, Tim, were really shocking, and I read something that said, I think the average age of a member of Bomber Command to die was 23 years old, which is just unfathomable. But then you think, you know, there were so many people that lost their lives, civilians as well as, you know, people that were fighting too. So, you know, it's kind of good to remember, I think, the kind of real gravity of things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting because obviously most of our characters are very much rooted on the home front, but a couple of them, Edward included, have seen combat, and one of those is the character of Will, who becomes a member of the medical corps. And I think he's also someone that started off the war with a very defined set of ideals, and by the end of the war is kind of struggling to maybe stand by what he thought at the beginning, which ties us in quite nicely to a brand new scene that is going to be part of the audio drama, which features Mrs. Holt and Edith, who is Will's fiance in 1945. So this will be appearing in an upcoming episode of the audio drama, but this is a little filmed scene exclusively for you to enjoy. It was filmed in England and Scotland, so very much adhering to social distancing. So we're going to watch that now.
Oh, Edith, Miss Caulfield, we thought you were in London.
Oh, I was, but it was getting terribly rowdy. They were dancing in the fountains in Trafalgar Square, climbing up the lions, all sorts.
Well, that sounds like jolly good fun, but I imagine there's rather a lot of drink splashing around too.
A little too much, truth be told.
It'll be the same on Bedford Road later. Mr. Nelson's always inclined to overdo it. And Elizabeth White can put away the gin when she thinks no one's looking.
Can she?
Oh, yes. She might present a veneer of respectability now, but she was quite a wild thing in her day.
Mrs. White? The Mrs. White?
She danced on the table in the Hare and Hounds on Armistice Day while they sang Mademoiselle from Armentières. She smashed 4 glasses. We thought it was the war to end all wars. Silly, really. Such a sweeping statement.
Oh, but we've been given a second chance now, haven't we? To put things right.
Will you stay in Shuttlefield after the wedding?
Oh yes, I've grown quite fond of the place. And my father's managed to find Will a good job in town, writing. Have you seen him? I've been waiting.
I think I saw him at the Winters house collecting chairs. No one has escaped Operation Street Party.
The Winters house?
That's right. Oh, look, there's flags around the door. The vicar always gets into the spirit of things. We were married at this church, Peter and I. It rained, but it didn't matter. You'll learn that, my dear, as time marches on, a great many of the ups and downs that seem so important at the time really don't matter. Are you coming to the bonfire later?
The what?
The bonfire up at the Grange is going to be quite spectacular. Although the boys will have to stay at home. They bark for hours if they hear a firework.
All that loud noise. Is it really a good idea? I never ask where he's been, the things he's seen. It doesn't do to dwell, does it? I just try to be kind. A cup of tea, small gestures. And with time, we'll be all right.
Of course you will. You're very lucky to have come through all this and have a chance. Together.
Yes, I know. I often think I'm the luckiest girl in the world. He came home. And he came home to me. And he's so clever and brave. He writes the most beautiful things, you know. I've never read such beautiful writing. It's everything I could have imagined when I was a little girl. More. But he doesn't love me.
I'm sorry?
Should we go into the church? I think the service is about to start. I can't wait any longer.
We were married at this church, Percy and I. Not Percy's the dog.
I love that little scene.
We couldn't not put that in, really.
the end clip. No.
Yeah, couldn't not put that in.
It's great. It's the dog. Oh dear, Mrs. Holt. I think one of the most interesting things for me about that scene, and when I wrote that scene, is the fact that Mrs. Holt mentions the end of the First World War. I think it's almost impossible to imagine that a lot of people on VE Day would have already seen the end of one huge conflict and we're now right back in the same position. What do you think that experience would have, how do you think they would have carried that into VE Day?
I honestly don't think it's, I think it's something that I think VE Day, when it actually, occurred, huge celebration, big sense of relief. But I think in the days following, I think perhaps there might have been cases of a bit of cynicism creeping in. it comes up in Greyhounds with some of the older residents who talk about how, you know, they've been through this already when they said, you know, this is the war to end all wars, you know, it'll be peace from now on. So I think after the initial relief of, you know, VE Day, obviously a lot of people still would have commented that war was still going on. But there still would have been that little cynicism saying, well, we've already had this. We had this, you know, 20 odd years ago, and here we are again. But at the time, I really think most people, on the whole, would have just been enjoying the moment for what it was.
The relief.
Yeah, the release of it after, you know, 6 years of, well, I say 6 years of rationing. The rationing went on for another 10 years. But even so, that sense of relief of, you know, restrictions are being eased, you know, the sense of everybody coming together to doing what is necessary rather than what they want to be doing. You know, everybody doing and making little small sacrifices and doing what's right for the greater good, so to speak. But having that big relief of sort of we all did it together in that sense.
I think it's also important to remember that the war was still going on in the Pacific for another 3 months. So there was a lot of people that weren't home for VE Day and weren't going to be coming home for quite a few months yet.
I think if you kind of apply it to where we're at today, like obviously we're in the midst of a global pandemic and we're all locked in our houses, we've got limitations on what we can do, where we can go. I mean, if this is lifted, I think, and another one came along and that was lifted, I think I would very much be in a mindset of, oh my God, this is going to happen again.
Yeah.
And I can really relate to how the people who'd seen the First World War would have felt.
I think also relating it to our current situation, kind of like how we were saying, VE Day didn't just signal the end of everything, like everything going back to how it was. Like you mentioned, Tim, the rationing continued well into the 50s and the fighting continued into August. It was a very gradual kind of, it was a very gradual shift from the war happening to the war finishing. Like one of my favourite facts, and I know Tim's going to laugh at me for this, but the British cheese industry did not recover until the 1990s from the war. Like,
really?
Yeah.
I know, right? Love that fact. Cheese fact.
It's a good one though, isn't it? It shows
There's a great little nugget of trivia there, yeah.
But yeah, do you think knowing these characters as well as we do, because obviously we've been performing this show for over 2 years now, have you drawn any parallels to our current situation, or has it made you think about things a bit differently because you've had that research and experience into the Second World War?
I think the community spirit that has started to emerge throughout this pandemic has been perhaps the only positive thing about this, let's be honest, really scary, horrible situation. But, you know, particularly talking about VE Day and street parties, like I know quite a few people have been, you know, like there's bunting like on all the houses on our street. People are kind of sitting within 2 meters distance, but like in their porches and things like that. So still celebrating it, but I think there's been a real surge of warmth towards each other. It's like I'm part of our sort of like Facebook group for our neighbourhood, and like the amount of kind of friendliness on there and people wanting to help each other out, whether it's kind of helping with the shopping or, you know, whatever, that you just kind of don't really see that normally. But I think this situation, like with the war, people are rallying together because we're weathering the same storm, aren't we? So, you know, we kind of have to stick it out together. So I think I've definitely kind of noticed some parallels with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd say sorry.
No, you go, Tim. You go, Tim.
Excellent. I do love the sound of my own voice. I was going to say that, you know, with the restrictions on and trying to make the most of sort of the supplies that you have in your house. So in my case, it's finding out that I'm really bad at cooking sweet potato, but I'm just going to keep on trying because it's what I've got. And it just ends up as a mush. And if anyone's watching and they know how to cook sweet potato, please do let me know.
Try sweet potato wedges.
Oh, they are, yeah.
Wedges?
My housemate makes amazing sweet potato wedges. Shout out Ash if you're watching. You better be. But she makes really good sweet potato wedges.
yeah, it's like things like that, you know, just making do with what you have. You know, I had to sew up a hole in my pocket, you know, rather than throw the entire trousers away, because you know, that's how I do things.
Trousers away when you put a hole in your pocket.
All of them.
Oh my Christ!
Throw the whole trouser away.
Especially, I buy all my clothes at the same time, so if one pocket goes, all of the clothes are going to just end up falling to pieces. They all need to go. So I've been sewing up holes. It's been great.
I think to steer us slightly back onto topic. I think personally, it's given me a much more a feeling of being part of VE Day a lot more than perhaps it would have done if we'd not just been locked in our houses for 2.5 months. I think obviously because I've been writing the new episodes of the audio drama during lockdown, I've been reading and watching quite a lot of World War II stuff anyway, because I find I have to fully absorb to be able to write. But I think it's made me feel a lot more connected to those people, like especially if we think back to March, when literally there was hardly anything on the shelves in the supermarket. Like you couldn't get flour, you couldn't find like.
It's really give you perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's also made me I think it's helped me keep going a little bit when I think about what they just had to get on with. I mean, I know things are really tough now, but when you see pictures of people literally sitting on the rubble of what was their houses, and obviously there's still conflicts like that happening now. So I think personally it has helped me just kind of get on with it and sort of try and keep pushing on.
Keep calm and carry on. As
I do love a little 40s playlist at the moment. It's really helping.
Yeah. So the residents are very excited to be organising a street party, which was one of the most common forms of celebration on VE Day. Everyone sort of piled out onto the street, got all the tables out, pulled together their crockery and their plates, as we saw in the little video at the beginning. But obviously it was also a chance to get dressed up, to put some nice clothes on. As Nancy mentioned, she saved up her lipstick especially.
I think that's so cute. Saved it for if they won.
So if you'd like to achieve a vintage hairstyle for a VE Day stay-at-home party or an in-the-garden picnic this weekend, then we've prepared, I have prepared a short tutorial to show you how to victory roll and pin your hair 40s fashion. It is the most awkward hair tutorial you'll ever watch, but I've had some nice messages from people today that have used it to do their hair for VE Day, so
great.
It does clearly work. So we will watch this hairdressing masterpiece now.
So what you need to do is vaguely, no, I need to be more precise than that. Today I'm going to try and share with you how to do some 1940s vintage hair. I've never done a tutorial on this before, so it could go anyway, but hopefully I will show you how to go from this, which is some sort of self-isolation quarantine chic thing, to this. First of all, you kind of want to be using hair that's been washed a couple of days ago, because freshly washed hair tends to just fall out of 1940s styles, especially if you have super fine hair like I do. Also, traditionally, my hair is a lot longer than they would have worn their hair in the 40s. So for a lot of 40s styles, I tend to have to roll mine up at the bottom rather than having it down and curled, because it's just too long to look authentic. So the style I'm going to show you how to do today doesn't involve any pin curling, which I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear, because I think the concept of pin curling maybe frightens quite a few people off of doing 1940s hair. Also, apologies for the horrendous roots, but that is another little treat from the ongoing isolation. So first of all, just brush your hair out. If, like me, your hair is super fine, like I've said, I tend to spray in a bit of dry shampoo just because it helps it to hold and grip a little better. So I'm just gonna spray some in just a little bit, like, and then just blend that in because I don't need any more grey in my hair other than what I've got already. This will just help things like victory rolls and curls just hold in better. Just gives your hair a bit of texture. I mean, I'm not any kind of expert on this. This is just what has worked for my vintage life so far. So the first thing you want to do is section off from ear to ear a front piece of hair, and this is going to be where you put in your nice victory rolls at the front. So let's do that now. Just in a fairly rough straight line, just so you've got this section at the front that we're going to put our rolls in. So with all your hair at the back, if you just have a clip or some bobby grips, just take that, twist it up and just clip it out the way for now, because we're going to come back to that later. We're going to make a few rolls out of this front section. What you want to do is split it into 3 sections with slightly more over to one side than the other. I always tend to put more on this side because I think it suits the shape of my face better, but obviously that'll depend on what side you tend to part your hair and things like that. And then you want to split roughly there so that you've got these 3 sections. Just turning my curling wand on here. You can do it without a wand, but I find that it's easier with my hair to help it hold the curls a bit better if I just curl them in this middle section. You want to take, I think these are called, are they barrel brushes? I'll double check, but I think they're called barrel brushes, but these ones with the fine bristles. Brush it up with one of these, and then you want to back comb it a bit to get some volume and structure into it. So just getting a bit of volume in here, and then take the tongs and we're going to curl it up and under. And then when we release that, kind of slide it off the tong into your hand, because you see then we've got that nice roll shape in our hand. And then we're going to take a few pins and we're going to fix this. So just check you've got any loose hairs nice and tight into the roll, and then you're just going to bring it down slightly and just use a couple of grips just to make sure that it's nice and firm, because you don't want it moving about anywhere. So see, we've got that nice rooty victory roll, but then just to make sure any of these little flyaway hairs are nice and neat, just give it a bit of a spray. We can get, once we've got the whole thing in place later, we'll give more of a spray, but if you just catch these flyaway ones now, just So that's your first victory roll in place. So again, we're just gonna backcomb in a bit of texture and a bit of volume before we roll the hair. This one's going to be facing away. So again, we'll get our tongs. Do you call it a tong? A wand? I'm not really down with this terminology. And this one's going to go here. So this one's going up and away, if that makes sense. I think I'm getting some lovely chin angles on the camera right now, but yeah, so this roll is going the opposite direction to the one we've just put on our forehead. It's going away, and again, kind of push it off the end of the barrel so that the curl comes ready formed into your hand, and then see, it's there, the curl, and then we can pin that there. With this third piece of hair, we're just gonna do exactly the same and backcomb in some volume just for a bit of added lift, and then take your wand / tong, and again it's going to be the opposite direction to the curl on your forehead, so the same as the one on the other side. Now you've got the front part of your hair pretty much in place, so give it a good spray. Now that we've got this in place, we want to let loose that hair at the back. You want to take some grips and just pin it. I hope you can see this. You want to pin it in a line at the nape of your neck. So we'll take a few pins, 6 or 7 pins maybe, just to get it in a nice straight line. So I've just pinned that. It's probably horrendously far from a straight line, but pinned that roughly at the nape of my neck there. And then with the hair that's left, we're going to brush in some volume just to give it some structure. So if you split it into 3 pieces, we're going to start with this middle piece, just brush in a bit of volume, and then once you've done that, we're just going to roll it kind of like we did at the front, but into a much looser barrel kind of roll. So we're going to just roll it into a much looser barrel kind of roll, just making sure the ends are tucked in, kind of like that, and then we're just going to pin it. So that's just kind of nice and loose at the moment, but we will neaten it up once we've got the other 2 sides in. So now we want to do the exact same for these bits at the side. And then we're going to pin it and try and join it up to the other one that we've put in, if that makes sense. And then you want to do the same with this final piece of hair. Again, you want to loosely clip it so it's kind of in one continuous roll with the others. If you've got these bits of flyaway hair, you just want to kind of give them a little spray, smooth them down. I hope you're seeing some of this. So you just want to give it a spray and smooth it down. If they're being particularly stubborn, you can just pop another little bobby grip in. When doing vintage hair, they are your best friends. You will get through hundreds of them. Yeah. So now you're set. If I'm planning on wearing 40s hair for an extended period of time, if I was going out for the day, back when that was a thing that we were allowed to do, I would normally stick a headscarf around it, because so round the rolls at the bottom and then up behind your victory rolls at the front, so kind of just like that, because I feel it holds it in shape a bit better and it helps it to last the day. So you just want to put your little headscarf there and then just adjust it around the rolls at the back so that it's kind of not pushing them up too much, just kind of holding them. Yeah, I find putting a headscarf on like this just helps to keep everything in position if I'm going to be getting on public transport, going around a museum or something. Whereas if you're just going out for some drinks or some cake, as is more usually the case in my situation, you can wear it without the headscarf. But yeah, so I hope that makes some kind of sense. If you like this, I can show you a few more styles. I can show you some styles involving pin curling, and that'll be taking your vintage hair skills up to the next level. I don't know what that was. Yeah, so there you go.
We've definitely had a fair few vintage hair traumas over the past couple of years, haven't we?
Absolutely.
I've not missed
I've got quite a fresh burn across my jawline. I think the 40s had it right, really, not using heat styling products and just sleeping in the roll as other pin curls. Much less danger.
Yeah, I still have a burn scar on my hand from, you didn't know whether to call it curling tongs. I prefer like a devil wand because it just causes pain. And also, I kind of, sorry, Ashley, my housemate, if you're watching, I kind of melted the carpet a little bit one time with the curling on. So I think Catherine's right. The heated tools, no, just sleep in the pin curls, it's much better.
I mean, it's harder to sleep, but...
Yes, but then you look fabulous, so, you know.
So now we're going to just answer a couple of questions and, respond to the request to just explore the British cheese industry a little bit more. So, during World War II, the British government decreed that as part of war economics and rationing, only cheddar cheese made in a certain way would be available to the population. All milk produced that normally went to make different kinds of cheeses went instead to factories to make the cheddar that became known as government cheddar. The decree banning the production of any cheese but government cheddar continued until the end of rationing in 1954, 9 years after the war. And it was the implications of this that led to the ramifications of the British cheese industry not re-establishing itself until the 1990s, because a lot of independent dairies and cheesemakers were obviously put out of business by the government cheddar scheme.
Laura, do you think it's a coincidence that you were born in the 1990s and that's where the cheese industry really picked up again?
Hashtag conspiracy. So we've had a question come in that says, what part of your characters do you all resonate with, and what has your character taught you? So Tim, if you start us off.
I would probably say with Edward, it's I'd probably say it's a part of expectation and resonates with me with a certain way that, depending on your upbringing, certain things are expected of you. And I find that relatable in certain ways. And it's certainly that aspect of it. I'd probably say Edward's much more serious than I am. He probably doesn't throw his trousers away if they've got a hole in. So yeah, it's essentially it's just trying to find that balance between. I'd say it's a lot of sort of the pressure of expectation, I'll probably say.
And Fiona?
So what about Nancy resonates with me? The fact that she's an amazing actress, I can relate to that.
And her humility.
I'm just kidding. I think the fact that she finds it really rewarding helping people, like that's so corny, but like all the kind of work that I've done, like jobs that I've done, is kind of focused around helping people, and I find that really rewarding too. And kind of edges into people pleasing sometimes. So I think what I could learn from Nancy is the way she sort of learns to sort of like stand up for herself and feel more kind of self-assured in who she is and what she's doing and what like her purpose is. So yeah, that journey that she goes on, I guess I could learn something from that too.
Ruby?
So I think what resonates with me about Ruby's character is how she just kind of makes do, gets on with things, makes the best of a situation. I think we've all had situations where circumstances haven't been in our favour, but we just get on with it, we push on through, and I think that's a good quality of hers and one I've taken on board. Something that I'd like to kind of incorporate into my own life from her personality would probably be her optimism. Bit of a pessimist, but I think the outlook that she has at the end of the play is really lovely and something to look up to. How about you, Laura?
So I think, Catherine Winters is essentially me, apart from I can't do maths. I've talked before, like in the lead up to Edinburgh and so forth, that I find there's a lot of parallels between me and Catherine. I guess because of like my OCD and anxiety, I definitely relate to Catherine Winters a hell of a lot, and I think I also use her now definitely as a bit of a benchmark for getting through my life, because what I would like to embrace more from Catherine is her, obviously things do get to her, but she's very much just like, she just marches to the beat of her own drum and she doesn't care what anybody says, and she calls a spade a spade. She says to Mrs. Holt that she hates her hat. She says to Will that he's a terrible actor. Like, she just she's totally upfront with people, and I think I don't know, I find talking about Catherine makes me quite emotional actually. I think because she's such a, especially at that time, people didn't really understand her. People saw her as a bit of an outsider, a bit of, a bit weird, a bit strange. And throughout the course of the play, she really finds herself and finds her purpose despite the system and society sort of trying to put her back in her box. And I find her quite an inspiration throughout my life, which sounds really full of myself, seeing as I wrote that character.
I am so inspirational to myself.
Yes, this fictional version of myself inspires me.
Yeah. Just seeing myself in print, just And on that note, Catherine, I believe you have prepared a special VE Day quiz for us, which...
Yes, Laura, I have prepared a special VE Day quiz. So, if you can grab a pen and paper, anybody at all watching this, feel free to join in. Shan't reveal the answers until the end. So, pens at the ready, and off we go. Sorry, that was weird. Question number 1. How many appearances on the balcony of the palace did the King and Queen make on VE Day?
We're going to start with a hard one.
I thought I would know this because I have a line about this.
Yeah, I thought that this would be your saving glory. Because
is there more than what she said?
I know. I was just thinking, is that the answer or is there more?
Yeah. Well, what time of day did? Sorry, this isn't. Anybody else that listened to this episode not know what we're talking about.
Pop a number down.
Oh, okay.
Okay, if everyone's ready. Question number 2. Princess Elizabeth, or our Queen as she was then, joined which service during World War II, allowing her to blend in with the crowd celebrating on VE Day when she was wearing her uniform?
Ooh.
Do 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 do. When did rationing end in the UK? Is it A, 1945, B, 1947, C, 1949, or D, 1954?
It may have already come up. We don't know.
It's a little test to see how well people have been listening.
Have you been listening to us?
Embarrassing if any of us get this wrong.
Okay, question number 4. Who was the US president on VE Day? There's only 52 to pick from, I think. Is that right? 52?
54.
54.
Can I get a point for that? Because I don't know.
No, you can't. You can't get it. You can't get a point for that.
All right, worth a shot.
Question number 5. What were people allowed to purchase without rationing coupons in celebration of VE Day?
I've gone bold with that one.
What? You said
I've gone for a bold answer.
Oh, I thought you were talking about hair, as in. I've gone bold.
You see, my mind immediately went to bold, the washing up stuff. I guess that's a 90,
Oh, I don't know what to say.
Question 6. At what time on VE Day did Prime Minister Winston Churchill address the nation?
As a little hint, they broadcast that speech at the exact same time today.
I wish your face was magnificent.
So embarrassed.
Coming out of that.
I didn't do my homework. I'm so sorry.
I do hope all of the answers to this are right. I have fact checked them on the internet, but I feel like Laura's going to tell me different answers because she knows all of the facts. But I've done my best. Question number 7. How many sheets of toilet roll was each British soldier fighting in World War II allowed per day? I thought this one was quite topical.
It's like, have I got
toilet paper?
So I've just laughed at my own answer.
Number 8.
Which is weird because it's a number.
Yeah. There's not much comedy in a number. Number 8. Which London landmark was lit by floodlights for the first time since 1939 on the evening of VE Day?
I don't even know if this was built then. Oh, I'm doing so badly.
It's not the Millennium Dome.
It's not the London Eye.
Oh, damn
it. Number 9. How many church services did St Paul's Cathedral hold on VE Day? I've given you multiple choice for this one because I'm kind. Is it A, 3, B, 10, C, 4, or D, 8?
Interesting ordering you've done there, Catherine.
I actually wrote this question in a quiz I did last week, so I hope I still remember what the answer is.
Sorry, can you read that out again? Because I got thrown off by the fact that the numbers were just in no order whatsoever.
So the answers could have been A, 3 church services, B, 10 church services, C, 4 church services, or D, 8 church services?
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a bit creative with the numbers. And our final question, referring to the celebrations, who said, "I think it was one of the most memorable nights of my life"? I mean, probably quite a few people said that, but...
Yeah.
Who specifically do you want us to get right?
Did I put everyone or no?
Right, are you ready for some answers?
Oh, this is so embarrassing. I've done really...
How do you think you've done?
I've struggled with some of those.
I think I'm going to get 7.
Okay.
Are you serious? 7?
Yeah, I'm guessing right now I'm going to get 7.
Really big spuds in the corner.
I think I've got 1, and that's because it was multiple choice, and Tim mentioned it earlier in the recording.
Okay, so I'm going to trust you to mark your own answer sheets because of social distancing. So let's go from the top. Number 1, how many appearances on the balcony did the King and Queen make on VE Day? The answer is 8.
Oh, I said 9. Do I get a point?
I said 5.
Well, no, because that's what Nancy says have been out 5 times already, but that's early in the morning, so I still got it wrong, so it doesn't matter, does it?
Point for a relevant Greyhounds answer. I don't know.
I think if we got it wrong, we got it wrong.
Please, Laura, I'm really scraping the barrel here for any marks. Just let me have the mark.
Tell you what, Fiona, we'll reevaluate at the end, and if you've done embarrassingly badly, just add on an extra half point or 2 here and there.
Okay, thank you.
Princess Elizabeth, our queen as she was then, joined which service during World War II, allowing her to blend in with the crowds celebrating on VE Day when wearing her uniform? The answer was the ATS, which is just behind Laura there.
I've put Transport Division because she was a mechanic, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was.
I believe so.
A point for that.
Yeah, I put that as well. I put all of those things.
Yeah, to be honest, just yeah, freestyle on the points.
Yeah.
There's no prizes. When did rationing end in the UK? The answer was D, 1954.
She's got a point, people. She's got a point.
Woohoo! Who was US President on VE Day? Any guesses?
Was it Truman?
It was Harry Truman. Question 5. What were people allowed to purchase without rationing coupons in celebration of VE Day?
This was Tim's bold answer.
Oh, yes, Tim. Tell us what you put.
I put beer.
No.
I put bunting.
It was red, white and blue bunting.
Oh.
Which I think
Should
is
have been
quite
beer.
good. Number 6. At what time on VE Day did Prime Minister Winston Churchill address the nation? It was 3 p.m.
As it was today.
As it was today. I think Laura did mention it in the group chat earlier. Fiona. Might have missed that one.
I got confused and was thinking about the timelines of the play, and when Ruby's listening to the radio, so I was like, oh, 7 a.m?
Little early one.
Had a little message coming in from a fellow cast member saying, well done on your 1 point in this quiz, Fiona.
1.5 actually, thank you, if we include the pity half point.
Okay, number 7. How many sheets of toilet roll was each British soldier fighting in World War II allowed per day? The answer was a pitiful 3.
Ah! I wrote that down and I laughed because I wrote next to 3 sheets to the wind, and that's what made me laugh.
I think I might have found a woman's amount of toilet paper.
Which was
10.
Well,
Frivolous.
when I was looking up, apparently US soldiers were allowed 22 sheets a day.
Oh, I guess they're maybe seeing more bathroom action.
Moving swiftly on. Which London landmark was lit by floodlights for the first time since 1939 on the evening of VE Day? It was Buckingham Palace.
God, why didn't I just say that? To be fair, I put Houses of Parliament.
I put Parliament as well, and that's me getting 3 wrong now, so I have to get the next 2 right. So
was Big Ben built then? No? Yes.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't a completely tragic guess, but it was still wrong, so never mind.
How many church services did St Paul's Cathedral hold on VE Day? Was it 3, 10, 4 or 8? And the answer from that very controversial ordering of those numbers was 10.
See, I should have thought that, because I bet you just did 2. Gave that as the answer. I was like, oh, I better chuck in a couple more options. Should have thought. Damn it.
And final question, which was perhaps ill thought through, referring to celebrations, who said, I think it was one of the most memorable nights of my life.
Was it her
Any
match?
guesses? It was her match.
That's what I said!
Or as she was then, Princess Elizabeth.
Am I allowed to get the point? I said the Queen.
Yep.
Okay.
So how have we done?
Oh, God. I think we all know how I've done.
Did you
actually get 7?
Yeah, I did.
Did you actually?
Yeah, I did. I got
I
7.
only got 6.
I got
Embarrassing
full
for you.
marks. I got 10.5.
I know you did.
Got 2.
Well done, Fiona.
Thank you.
Well done.
Well, I actually learnt a lot writing that quiz, and if I'd been doing it, I think I probably would have got 4 or 5. So.
Oh, of course, I just did really bad then. really bad.
So, I think it's time for us to wrap things up, because the very first episode of Greyhounds 1945 is about to go live over on SoundCloud. And once you've listened to that and enjoyed it, you'll obviously want to hear more from us. So tomorrow there is going to be a special podcast launching our brand new podcast called Then Again, Behind Big Moments in History. And tomorrow's episode is naturally all about VE Day, in which we delve deeper into the actual history of VE Day. So the origins of the Victory Salute. We talk a bit more about Bomber Command again. We talk about firework injuries, of which there was an embarrassingly high amount because we are British. Wow. So joining me on that podcast tomorrow will be Tim, and will also be Paul Wilson and Anthony Morris that play Mr. Nelson and Tom in Greyhounds. So that will be going up at 7 p.m. tomorrow. So you've got first episode of the audio drama tonight, and then the podcast tomorrow, and we'll be also be posting some more videos and bits and pieces over the course of this VE Day 75 weekend. So thank you very much, Fiona, Catherine and Tim, for joining me on this live stream.
Oh, it's really fun.
Thank you, Laura, for hosting this live stream.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say goodbye
till we meet again.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Time and Again Theatre Company. Good night.
Fade us out, John.